Welcome to Second Act Freelance. My name is Judson Voss. And last week on the podcast, we discussed a little bit about why now is the right time to become a freelancer, potentially. So the next logical question that goes along with that is it the right time for me to be a freelancer? Number one, and number two, is freelancing even for me? If you've been a professional working in the work environment for a long time in a corporate job, you've probably gotten pretty used to how things work. If you're successful, you've learned to navigate the situation. But when it comes to being a freelancer, you can still take those same skills, the hard skills, the technical skills that you've picked up over the years, and use those. But you're also going to have to think about, do I have or do I want to learn some other skills that go along with essentially being a business owner? So today I'm going to break down a few different things, and then in future episodes, we're going to go into each of these more in depth. But today I just want to go over sort of the cursory picture of it. Don't know that that's a word. I think it is, but somebody will look it up and send me an email. If it's a word, actually nobody's going to send anything. If it isn't, then I will get hate mail. It's okay. At least something is good. Any reaction is good enough. So as far as other things you can do, sort of along this path, I do have an ebook called Am I Ready to Be a Freelancer? Feel free to go over to the website, Second Act Freelance, and download that. And you can walk through a little bit more details, a few exercises. There's a couple little tools in there to be able to use to discern, is now the right time for me to freelance, and is it the kind of thing I want to do? The other thing you can do, of course, is like and subscribe on YouTube or favorite the podcast and on iTunes or wherever you get your audio podcast. And then you can hear more about this as we have upcoming episodes. Without boring you about myself, I've been freelancing for, I think it's about 7-8 years, something like that. Obviously, I've been in the job market a little bit longer than that. So working at corporate jobs, have my own business, a few different things. The ebook, I go into a little bit more detail, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time today on that. But before we sort of dive into, am I ready to be a freelancer? I always like to start with the question, not of how or what, but why. And I think in anything in life, if you have a strong enough why, you're going to figure out the how and what. I know it sounds cliche. I think it actually is a cliche, but it is also 100% true. So I just want to throw this out there. It's something to think about as far as the big question for the day. If you're in, like I said, a lot of folks that are watching and listening are second act, a little bit later in their career. And so maybe you're 45, 50, maybe a little bit beyond that. But the question is, if you're, let's say you're 50 and you want to retire when you're 65, that, using my calculator, means that you have about 15 years left in sort of your professional work life. You may not want to retire, but I'm using this as numbers. And so my question is this: if you were to take the fact you have 15 years left and you said to yourself, you know what, the first 30 years, like if we have 15 left, first 30, that's a round number as far as where we're at. Over the next 15 years, I want to do one of two things. I want to double down, take everything I've learned in the first 30 years and use the next 15 years to quadruple the impact that I've made in the first 30 years. And then the other thing I can do, or I can ask myself this question, is this what I want to do, is take the next 15 years and keep it status quo. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but you need to ask yourself the question. And so, over the next 15 years, what does that look like for you in your professional life? Is it continuing on? Is it moving up the corporate ladder further, though you may be at the top of the corporate ladder or near it right now? I mean, if you're a CMO in marketing and you have no interest in being a CEO, the only other move corporately is another CMO role, I guess. Or you can be asking yourself, how can I take the next 15 years, build a business, build a brand for myself, and take what I've learned in the first 30 years and turn it into something else? again, even though I'm setting it up like that matters, that I'm picking A over B, more importantly than what I think is what you really want to do, because intentionality is what's going to make a difference, especially if you want to be a freelancer, because sort of meandering around freelancing is not going to do it for you. You need to have a plan and you need to have your why. So ask yourself that question. What is my plan for the next 15 years? And what is the impact I want to make over the next 15 years? Financially, in the market, with my family, whatever that is. And I think that's going to help you start to set yourself up for the why of freelancing and what you want to do. So if I had a sponsor, this is where we drop the sponsor in there, but I don't. So I'm just doing this for free. If you want to sponsor us, we're more than happy to have a conversation about that. But otherwise, we're just going to uncomfortably move on to the next section. So today, as I mentioned, I want to talk about, am I ready to be a freelancer? And sort of go through at a high level some of those things that you want to think about. Secondactfreelance.com. I've got the ebook there. If you get tired of listening to me drone on and on, feel free to go over there and read that instead at your leisure. It's going to go into more depth than what we're going to talk about today, but in future episodes, we will go into more depth into each of these. And I am really, really, really trying to focus just on the question, am I ready to be a freelancer? And not the question of how do I freelance? What do I do next with each of these things? We'll get there. But for now, it's just about, looking at these things, what it takes to be a freelancer and to go into it with your eyes open. And really, most importantly, if you've sold out yourself on this and you do want to be a freelancer and create a freelance business, the question is it now? And if it's not now, what are the gaps that I have that I need to fill in before I get there? Or maybe it's part-time now. What are the gaps I need to fill in to get to full-time? And those are really important things to think about. Again, like I said, intentionality is the key. And so going through each of these and thinking from that perspective is really helpful. So number one is time. I would love to say you hang a shingle out tomorrow maybe, and all of a sudden you are rocking and rolling and you have people coming in and your biggest problem is how do I invoice all this billable hours and time and contracts and everything like that. Most likely that won't be how it is from day one. If it is for you, great for you. That's awesome. But for most of us, it doesn't start that way. It starts by building something and figuring out what each of the steps are and answer the question, do I have the time to commit right now to get into it? The reason I say, do I have the time to commit is I think if you really want to build a freelance business, no matter where you're at in your career, no matter what's going on, if you're not honest with yourself, figuring out the amount of time it's going to take you to do it and what you want to do to commit as far as time into that, you're going to find yourself meandering and you're going to find yourself not doing it. And you're going to come back here 3, 4, 5 months from now and say, this freelance thing didn't work out because I didn't really get any traction or do anything for it. So first thing is think about, do I have the time? Do I have the time to learn what it takes to be a freelancer? Do I have the time? We'll go into some of the other steps later to go through those steps. And how long do I want to take and what kind of time commitment do I want to make daily, weekly, whatever that is, to start to build or put the steps in place to build my freelance business. I think being honest with yourself will get you a long way there. I also think if you can choose that time and you commit to that time, I'd be really surprised if you're not successful, if you do some of the other things that are needed. The second thing I think about when it comes to freelancing is less measurable, because time, I can measure that, the time it takes. But the next question is, am I cut out for it? And I don't mean, are you mentally strong enough or are you good enough at different things? But is it the kind of thing I want to do? Freelancing is not like a corporate job where you go in Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, assuming the economy doesn't tank and you don't mess something up really bad, then you still have a job. And at the end of the week, the month, whatever that is, you get a direct deposit in your checking account. Freelancing is less predictable It may still be consistent, but it's less predictable. And you may have some ups and downs in income. You may have times when you think, you know what, I'm looking down 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks from now. I don't see where the next thing is going to come from, and I'm nervous about that. Ask yourself the question, is that something you thrive in? And if it isn't, is it something at least you can put up with? Or number 3, giving you 3 choices there. Is it something that you're willing to learn how to handle? Just be honest with yourself. If the thought of not knowing where your paycheck's coming from 6 weeks from now, but having a feel for what the options are, what the possibilities are, but still not knowing for sure, if that knots up your stomach, then you need to take that into account and be honest with yourself. Is freelancing for me? Now, we'll talk about some different things later on, fractional, contract work, those types of things that will mitigate that. But I think knowing which of those and what your threshold is for unpredictability and change really will help you guide your way into the different places. And maybe you say, you know what, right now this isn't me. Maybe it's something I want to do in the future and I want to work on it, and I can do that. The other thing personality-wise that I would seriously consider is self-discipline. If you're the kind of person that needs a supervisor to plan out your schedule for you and tell you, this needs to be done on this day and I need a deliverable here, or even, the deadline is here. I'm going to check in on you every day if we're there. Let's take the deadline and chunk it down into daily pieces. I'm not saying you don't work in an environment where you do that. I'm saying, do you need that to accomplish things? And if you do, then one of 2 things. One is you may not be cut out to freelance and work on your own. Or number 2, you need to know that going in and have a plan to mitigate for it. So do I need a project manager to work with me? Do I need some type of accountability? Whatever those things are, if it's not your strong suit today, having self-discipline and motivation and keeping yourself on track, then you need to think about what do I need to do to make that happen if I really do want to freelance. Like I said, don't exclude yourself from freelancing because of it, but think about what you need to do to mitigate those pieces. The number 3 thing that I would think about if you're ready to freelance is your network and your connections. And I'm going to go into this a lot throughout this podcast. If I had to pick one thing that I honestly, truthfully, 100% believe affects whether you will be successful in your freelance business, and maybe in a lot of businesses out there if you start your own business, is your network and connection. Jeff Henderson has a awesome book about going out on your own. And one of the things he talks about in there, and he's a big proponent of networks also, is that what you know, and I'm going to mess up this quote. I'll find it later and put it in the show notes. But what you know affects your income much less than who you know. And when it comes to freelancing, there is nothing any more true than that. The who you know, and I'm going to throw a caveat in there, who you can get to know is more important than what you know. Now, if you know way more than everybody else, you may get paid a little bit more per hour or whatever that is, and maybe you get better, bigger jobs. That could be true. But as far as the overall income and having work, who you know is much more important. And when you think about it, are you ready to be a freelancer? I'm not saying you need to have a big network today. I'm not saying you need to have a network or connections today. What I would say is you need to think about the fact that this is ultimately important. And since it is ultimately important, am I willing to put in the work to build that network and those connections? And in the ebook, I mentioned, Am I Ready to Be a Freelancer? I talk about myself and my personal story. So just to give you a feel, and I think just rough numbers, I maybe had 10 people in my network that I considered when I started out. 3 of them were interested in giving me work at the time to varying degrees, a couple just a little bit here or there. 4 of them were interested in helping me find people that could give me work, as in they had some folks in mind that they knew of. They didn't need any work right now, but they already had some people that they thought of that like needed my help in what I do. And then I had 3 other people that were like, you know what? I called all these people. I haven't heard from you in a while. I'd love to go get coffee with you. And out of those 10 people, that gave me enough to believe it or not, get a week's worth of work every week, going on 7 years now. I'm not still working with just the same people. Some are, but not just the same people. But those 3 people that were willing to give me work at the time, just to give you a feel, were, I think at the time, going to give me 15, 20 hours worth of work, which was a pretty considerable amount, especially since 40 hours of billable work in a week would be a lot for me. So 20 would be a lot more than half. And I had those people up front. So was I ready to go full time? I wasn't, but did it give me the confidence that I could potentially, if I wanted to? Yes. And so that's where I want you to start with. Where are you at? Again, in the ebook, there's some exercises, but just one quick tip. Just start writing down all of the people that you know that either may provide work for you, or may know people that can provide work for you. Or maybe you don't know that they can do either, but you'd like to get to know them. In the ebook, I go through, I think it's 8 different places you can find these people. And you can go through those lists and write down the people you know in those 8 different areas. But I will say, out of anything in the podcast today, if you choose to do anything that I say, do this. And yeah, I mean, worst case scenario, you don't want to be a freelancer. You have all these other connections you've now listed out. If tomorrow you decide you're tired of your job, or you have to leave your job, you've got a nice list of people to start on. So day 2, after you take a day off of deciding what to do next with your life, you've got a list already there. So that one is a pretty low risk. Spend 30 minutes and you're going to set yourself up for success, regardless if you decide you want to freelance or not. So that's my tip there. Also would say, don't make a mental list right now, whether it's on a piece of paper, a spreadsheet. I love Notion. Man, I wish Notion would pay me money, because I would do a bunch of Notion videos and I just love it. But spreadsheet, Google Sheets, piece of paper, notes, whatever that is, actually write all of those people down, and you'll get bonus points if you put the contact info in there too. But don't go and look for it right away. Then like Bob Jones, and then I'm going to spend 30 minutes finding Bob's email address and phone number. Just write Bob Jones down when you get time later. If you don't have his info, go get it. Just make the list now. Make it hard. Write it down. And so I should have done that as the last one, because sort of anticlimactic, and the one nobody wants to talk about. And that is your financial situation. Your financial situation affects whether you are ready to be a freelancer sort of in 2 different ways. One is, to what degree are you ready to freelance full-time now? Now, I'm not giving career advice. I'm just giving advice on things I've learned as a freelancer. But if you're living close to the razor's edge financially, for me, I don't think it would be prudent just to make a leap and say, I'm quitting my job tomorrow. I'm going to go start trying to find work. I don't have any right now, but this is what I want to do. Maybe that's okay for you. But to me, that's just not the route I'd want to start on. Having that in mind, then the next question is, with the finances I have today, to what degree and when can I become a full freelance business owner? I like writing things down. I like having a plan. I like making it concrete. I like being able to say, once I get to X, Y, and Z, I am fully and 100%, well, I am mostly and partially confident that this is the best thing to do and now. At the very least, financially, it feels like I'm in a pretty good place. And I'm making up numbers. If I've got a year's worth of spendable income that I don't really need and I'm ready to do this thing, then maybe it's the time to do it. But you need to pick that number for yourself and do it for 2 reasons. One is, I think it's wise to have a decision process in mind. And number 2, I joked about, being 100% confident. No matter how prepared you are, you're going to be nervous, and you want to be in a place where everything you can do, you've done to feel good about pulling the trigger. But the other thing too is, when it comes to your financial situation, if you feel good and you feel comfortable with it, then it's one less thing to worry about. you're always going to be worried about, do I have enough work? Where do I get work from? Until the point in time, and I promise it comes, I've got too much work. How do I start saying no? But that'll always be there. And to throw on top of it, where am I going to get my next meal from? And where am I going to get my next project from? Not a great situation to be in. If you're in a situation where you're like, I'm really pretty darn comfortable financially, this project came along, doesn't feel good to me. I'd rather wait a couple of weeks to get something that I like a lot better, that might be there a lot longer, that will be easier on me stress-wise. That's a better place to be. And so that's why I think finances, while we don't want to talk about it, I think it's a really important thing. And if you're not there today, just think about this. And I put this in the ebook too, but you throw any numbers you want in there. If you have 5 hours of work as a side hustle type of thing every week, and you reach out to one of those people on your network and they're like, I got like 5 hours worth of work a week. I could really use some help on. Give you $100 an hour to do it, $500 a week, $2,000 a month. And those extra 5 hours, they're not impeding on your job. So it's fine. You can do it. They're like, hey, I don't care when you do it. It's not involved with meeting with anybody or anything. Just do the 5 hours, get the work done. This is going to be a huge help to me. And I'll give you $500 for those 5 hours. In a month, you've got $2,000. Very worst case scenario, you just got yourself a vacation. You just paid for your next vacation, depending on what you do on vacation. That's a vacation for me and my 2 kids and my wife. But you do that for 6 months, you got $12,000. And maybe it's $12,000. You are now in that place where we were talking about, you feel very comfortable about considering going full-time. And the added bonus of you've just spent the last 6 months learning what it is to be a freelancer. So when you do go full-time, all those little issues, those little things you had to learn along the way, instead of them being amplified to full-time, you know how to handle them already, and you're in a good place there. So those are my 4 things that I would recommend starting with. Next time, we're going to go into 2 other things, which is 2 SWOT analyses. I don't know. We're gonna do 2 exercises where we're looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as another way to consider where you're at, how you position yourself as a freelancer in the business. And I think so that's going to help you also with, am I ready? Where am I at? And then number 2, who am I in this huge pool of people that may be looking to do freelance work, and where do I fit in best? So once you're ready, you're optimizing what kind of work you're doing, what the industry is, how you fit in, those types of things. So that will be next time. As I mentioned before, too, you can head over to secondactfreelance.com, download the ebook, Am I Ready to Be a Freelancer? Also watch past episodes, read blog posts. It's just a wonderful place to be. Not really, just a website. But you can check it out there. You can also sign up for the newsletter, and I will send out weekly or occasionally when I get to it. I'm committing pretty strong there to put out some other information, some tools and tips and things like that we just don't fit into doing on the podcast. I will put that out there on the website, secondactfreelance.com. If you're listening to this on a podcast directory, make sure you go over to YouTube and search for Second Act Freelance, and you can watch the video. Though, man, I look a lot better on audio, so you might want to just stick with that. And if you're on the video, head on over to one of your podcast directories or to secondactfreelance.com. There's links there, and you can get the podcast if you want to listen while you're heading to work, doing your workout, whatever that is, and you don't want to have have YouTube open and on your phone all the time while you're doing that. So anyways, just encouraging parting shot. I think anybody can freelance. The question is, do they want to, and are you ready to? So going through these steps, thinking through that, I believe honestly will give you the confidence you need to, 1, answer the question, am I ready? And number 2, if you're not ready, build a path to know what you need to do personally to get to that next step.